Ladies and gentlemen, we hear a lot of, if I can say, Western messages coming from the northern part of the hemisphere. And I'm extremely happy to have Ambassador Aljowaily from Egypt joining us for many, many reasons. When I lived in the Arabic world, and I know how it is important for Arab leaders to contribute to a positive way to the international dialogue. Egypt was maybe one of the most exposed countries in that area. Founding member of the non-aligned movement, very strong and active movement in Arab League, in the Islamic organization, cooperation organization, in the G77, and I'm sure I forget something, and by then you are the president of the Francophone ambassadors in Belgrade. So with all these hats, please, Ambassador Aljowaily, tell us how, seen from the developing world and seen from Egypt, multilateralism can contribute to the global peace. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. This reminds us so much of the UN, obviously, because of these well-experienced and distinguished colleagues who work at the UN. But this reminds me even more of the UN because of the time. I used to say we used to say in New York, probably in Geneva, there is maybe Central Eastern European time, and there's European Standard Time, and then there's UN Standard Time, which is about an hour after. So we used to attend some of the meetings before, but that tells you the dynamics about how the representatives from all over the world have to rush and run and shuttle between different meetings and to get work done. So if there's one title for my talk today, and I'm very happy that you invited us today to speak not only about our country's positions, which is incredibly important, but also about our personal experience, because I think Belgrade now is very lucky to have a number of very select ambassadors who have a multilateral experience. And in fact, we used to gather every now and then under the title of Geneva, but written with an NY rather than NE. Those ambassadors who were heads of missions who worked in Geneva, and New York, and Vienna, bringing a wealth of experience, I think, to promote the bilateral relations with Serbia. But this is not strange to Belgrade, because Belgrade, and I would say also Cairo, were beacons of multilateralism. They're founding the non-aligned movement. And I very much think that it was the non-aligned contribution was to a new multilateralism. Because the UN was established in 1945 with 15 countries, of which I think Egypt is proud to have been one. But the spirit that the non-aligned movement brought is a new multilateralism in the sense of meaningful multilateralism, and in the sense of representative multilateralism. And when you mentioned that, I'm happy to be probably the only African speaker, the only Arab speaker, I think also the UN and the non-aligned movement brought that inclusivity that reflects the diversity of the globe, of the world, further enriching this collective look. So I think if there is probably two words to remember of my short talk today, is collective and comprehensive. Very easy, two C's, collective and comprehensive. So let's see how the UN, the multilateralism that contributes to global security, the international peace and security, needs to get those two qualities together, collective and comprehensive. I think, after all, we're meeting in exceptional times. And this is the first in-person meeting that I attend since COVID-19, and I think it really shows how different the world has become. But very much as we meet in person here, and that is very much exceptional, because it doesn't happen often now with COVID-19. For the first time in its history, 75 years, the UN will be meeting, the high-level segment will be meeting almost all virtually. And there are two ways to think about this. Either that this is just a continuation of the norm, or that we are at a crossroad, we are at a traffic light. And whenever you're at a traffic light, unless you know the direction you're going to, you don't know whether to go right or left, you still stop at the red light, but you have to decide. So I think this is a moment of decision for multilateralism. And there are two ways to think about it. either to take the easy lane of unilateralism, like a number of speakers, including Minister Ivica Dacic, warned against, and others alluded to, either to take the easy lane of unilateralism, but later down the road, you could be stuck all alone in facing global challenges, or to reaffirm the multilateral spirit and principle and concept, and to maybe to go a little bit slower at the beginning, but very much reaching the final destination altogether. So this is a historic crossroad, it's a juncture at which we all have to take the decisions for ourselves. I think also what COVID-19 has shown is that not only is there universal, obviously, membership through the UN organization, but the increasing interlinkage of issues. Is COVID-19 an international peace and security issues? Well, I don't think we can classify it traditionally as such yet. It has led to challenges that are almost as serious, as severe as a serious threat to international peace and security. But here, again, at the crossroad, we're found with two choices: either to over-securitize issues, so either to bring in issues like COVID, like environment and other into the pure traditional security, international peace and security realm. By this, we over-securitize issues, or by ensuring that the traditional mechanisms that deal with such issues are made more effective. Because we always rely on the Security Council, since it's the only organ in the world that has the enforceable dimension to its decisions. But should this mean that when we face a challenge as serious as COVID, should we bring it to the Security Council only, or should we also empower other universal GA-based mechanisms to deal with it? And I think the decision and the position of Egypt and myself is exactly identical. No, we should reinforce the effective multilateralism that is global, that is universal because of that representativity and credibility that it ensures. And I think here, if there's one thing also we can remember collective and comprehensive, we'll see how these are, is that collective security, which was very much the foundation of the United Nations. I think Ambassador Falconi reminded us of that in his speech. Collective security was the foundation for the thinking, the conceptual thinking of the United Nations. Now we also have to think of collective development. The COVID reminds us that collective security will rest and can only rest and anchor and stable if there's collective development. Because there's absolutely no way for any nation or state to claim immunity from the contingencies of COVID-19 or of other challenges, including the environment, unless it is sure that its neighbors are doing that. It's an incredible opportunity for us to remember and to believe in that the good of our neighbors is for the good of ourselves. Because there are no methods of insulation in today's globalized world. So collective security should be based on collective development, and in this perspective, the meaningful participation by all is an essential characteristic. Now, if the UN should become more collective in the sense that it should reflect more the common will of all of its members, it should also become more comprehensive, meaning that it cannot take a partial, narrow-sighted view of any issue that it faces. And when we're speaking about international peace and security in particular, the view, the approach, the perspective that we adopt should be as comprehensive as it can. And I think, and especially as you mentioned, those other multilateral or regional or transnational level to which Egypt very proudly belongs, such as the Arab, the African Union, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, of course, the Conference, and others. I'm very proud that on the African level, the concept of a peace and security architecture was coined, more or less. APSA, the African Peace and Security Architecture, is probably the model for how to deal with threats to peace and security, maybe at the regional level, but from a comprehensive perspective. Do we think of the UN having a peace and security architecture? And I would say, unfortunately, not, and at least to date. We have a number of intergovernmental mechanisms, and we have a number of institutions and tools that deal with threats to international peace and security, not necessarily linking the whole cycle together. That is why I'm proud that, I'm actually happy to refer that this very term, the UN Peace and Security Architecture, was probably coined in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, during Egypt's membership of the Security Council as non-permanent member of the Security Council, calling for this comprehensive approach to threats to international peace and security that spans throughout the conflict cycle from the very essence of prevention into the sustainability of peace, all together cross-fertilizing and interlinking. Now, of course, there are methods and tools that one focus on peace building, such as the Peace Building Commission, Peace Building Support Office, and else. And there is the peacekeeping and there is the prevention. But to look at it from one perspective, calling the UN Peace and Security architecture is one that would lead to a much more reassured intervention to sustain peace and to prevent conflict. But also, if we speak about collective and comprehensive, we cannot forget that yes, the member states are the natural unit, owners of the UN, but equally so that there is an increasing space for the participation of other actors. This is what we call multi-stakeholder diplomacy. That was probably a term coined in the World Summit on Information Society 2005. So we need to discover new approaches, new frameworks to, of course, include input from other stakeholders, since many of the challenges that we face today are ones that need that span of actors. But in doing so, we would re-emphasize once again that multi-stakeholder diplomacy cannot come at the expense of the representation, the participation, the meaningful participation of actors from developing countries. Because we often feel that these new spaces that allow for an increasing number of actors sometimes does not really reflect the well-established equal representation of member states. There are, of course, not only structural challenges, but there are other resource-based challenges that make it difficult for the developing countries to participate equally and meaningfully in such spaces. And I'm sure there are creative and innovative ways to ensure that this participation also increases. I think today we spoke about, yes, multilateralism versus unilateralism, maybe to some extent, but we should also know that it's not such a dichotomy, meaning it's either that unilateralism is the only real challenge to multilateralism. Unfortunately, there are other terms that are coming out, such as what we call mini-lateralism, so that we are within a multilateral, under a multilateral ceiling, within a multilateral room, but the decision-making is not multilateral. And that is why we once again emphasize meaningful, effective participation in multilateralism. When Egypt was candidate for the Security Council membership in 2016, it held a retreat at El Alamein, this beautiful city on the northern Mediterranean coast of Egypt, and the title was towards an enabling multilateralism. You speak about an enabling environment for business to prosper, for investments to come in, but we should also speak about an enabling multilateralism that allows for the participation, even by the smallest units of the international system, in the decision making. So, yes, unilateralism is obviously the other side of the spectrum from multilateralism, but even within those chains of spectrums, there are other approaches that do not necessarily lead to this collective action by all. I don't want to take more time of you, but we'll be happy to see how this South perspective, as you mentioned, from different regional organizations can feed in to this thinking about the new multilateralism. I think very, very soon there will be another meeting of the African Union Peace and Security Council with the United Nations Security Council. This is probably the most well-founded partnership between the Security Council at the global level and any other regional organization. I believe it's the 14th meeting. So there are many, many lessons that can be learned, not only from the South in general, but from Africa in particular. And maybe we could actually utilize this great opportunity that you from the Institute of Energy Pact and the University of Belgrade and the Faculty of Security Studies to codify or so this wealth of experience that exists in Belgrade. Now maybe we can publish collectively more of this meeting. So thank you for bringing it to Belgrade once again, this multilateral forum, and I think it's a position that's well deserved and that promises a lot in the future.
Ambassador Aljowaily as the refreshing and welcome voice of the Global South. Do I need to say something else? I don't think so. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. But I'm going to add something. Development. Your neighbor, Madame Jacob, mentioned Cubans. You mentioned the development. And there is no way to do anything international, multilateralism, whatever, if we don't fulfill the gap between the rich north and the poor south. So thank you very much for your very precise point of view. And you were the very first speaker to mention businesses. So thank you very much, Mr. Alexander.